reaction as Prop 50, of course, has been one of the governor's biggest issues in the past year.
And CBS Executive Director of Elections and Surveys, Anthony Salvanto, he is standing by with fresh insight into the mindset of voters tonight.
And our Lauren Toms is hanging out with us in the studio tonight. She is our expert on Prop 50 and how it changes the maps in California.
We're watching closely, checking in on the early results, and we'll bring you the first batch of votes as soon as they come in. But let's go ahead and kick off our team coverage tonight. Max Darrow, he is with the governor tonight at the Democratic Party headquarters in Sacramento. Max, the governor has been very confident that ultimately Proposition 50 is going to pass. Curious what the mood is out there tonight. Is it anxious? Is it celebratory?
You know, we're waiting anxiously to hear from Governor Gavin Newsom tonight, but the atmosphere here really isn't a party at all. It's actually really kind of all business. What you see here is just a lot of media waiting to hear from the governor tonight. All eyes are on California with Prop 50, of course, because it has national implications that extend far beyond California. Now, aside from being Democrats' most vocal critic of President Trump, Gavin Newsom, the governor here, he and lawmakers put this on the ballot in a way to counter redistricting efforts that were happening in Texas that were designed to give the GOP 5 extra House seats in the midterm election. That was done at the request of President Trump. So if voters do pass Prop 50 here in California tonight, the Democrats would likely pick up 5 seats in the House ahead of the midterm elections next year. Going into the night, as you mentioned, people were looking pretty confident who were supporters of Prop 50. CBS News polling in the home stretch showed that 62% of likely voters said they planned to vote yes on Prop 50, while 38% said they planned to vote no. We'll dive even further into those numbers. That polling showed that among those planning to vote yes, 75% said they were doing so in an effort to oppose President Donald Trump. 70% said they wanted to oppose national Republicans, 62% of them said they wanted to support Democrats, and 41% of those who said they planned to vote yes on Prop 50 said they were doing so to support Governor Gavin Newsom. Now, Newsom and his supporters feeling confident tonight. We spoke with some of the big proponents of Prop 50, hopeful a win tonight will mean momentum for the Democrats as they try to retake the House in 2026. Listen.
This was the first step. It's certainly a statement by all of California on how we're going to fight back. And then we turn around and start talking to voters about what we need to do and what's at stake in the midterms.
It's pretty incredible. We've reached out to over 42 million voters. That's about 712,000 voters a day for the last 90 days. I think we've stood up an incredible apparatus that we plan to carry into the 2026 election to make sure we win back the House.
Obviously, the polls just closed a couple of minutes ago here in California, but we are hoping to hear from Governor Newsom, and we'll be waiting closely to see what he has to say as these results come in. Devin, Sarah?
Yeah, Max, Prop 50, if it passes, it really is just kind of a warm-up for next year's midterm election. So have you gotten a sense from the supporters out there tonight what the next battle might be that's on the horizon?
They really pointed towards the midterms being the next battle, but the hope was that this very ornate campaign that came up very quickly really did garner a lot of support and attention. So their hope is that they can push that and use that as momentum moving forward to hopefully for the Democrats and their stance to take back the House in those 2026 elections. But time will tell to see what the true next steps are as we wait for the final results to come in for Prop 50.
All right, Max Darrow, thank you very much. And Sarah, we're going to make sure to bring you the governor's comments as soon as he walks out onto the stage. You know, at that point, we're going to want to hear from him. He's become the public face of the redistricting battle nationwide. And so obviously we want to hear from him at some point tonight.
Yeah, in fact, we are getting some early returns now on the Prop 50 results. We're going to bring you that graphic right now as we are just getting some information into the newsroom. CBS News is now projecting that Prop 50 has, in fact, been voted into law, Prop 50 handily passing, in fact, and this is in line with what some of the earlier polling seemed to suggest.
Yeah, the early polling suggested as much a wide double-digit margin of victory, 62 to 38%, and it seems like because the polls have just closed a few moments ago, so that projection suggests that maybe that polling prior to Election Day is holding tonight.
Yes, obviously there are broad implications given the fact that Prop 50 has now passed and voters seem to have voted that into law. Let's get over to Lauren Toms. She's our Prop 50 expert. She spent the last few months reading between the lines of what now seems to be what could eventually be our new district maps. This is big news tonight.
Big news and a big victory for those in favor of Prop 50, especially Governor Gavin Newsom. But once all of this is over, Sarah, we're now going to have voters who you would not normally consider to be neighbors, all grouped into the same congressional districts. Now, these are live pictures from Los Gatos, where a no on 50 group of supporters, they are just now hearing some of these results come in. Earlier this evening, we heard from a California Republican who says she's not liking the odds even earlier today, but says that California needs to change.
The numbers don't look good, I'll be honest right now. It's all dependent on voter turnout. We've been under one-party rule for 15 years right now, and a lot of the policies that have passed have caused us to have the highest cost of living, the highest gas prices.
Now let's go to the maps. This side-by-side comparison really tells us the story. On the left here, you have the current districts and a big section here, as you can see, of northern and central California showing red-leaning districts, meaning Republican-held seats. But on the right there, take a look how that changes under Prop 50. The red GOP-leaning districts shrink down dramatically. Now here's a closer look at the proposed districts. Look what happens when we show the maps using a breakdown of the 2024 election results. Most of Northern California turns blue. On this map, the deeper the blue, the more Democratic votes. You can see only one or two districts that would strongly lean Republican. Now, we spent time in some of the more rural parts of California. We spoke with farmers in Butte County who would be put into the same district as people right here in the Bay Area. They tell us they worry they won't get the same representation on the issues they care about.
We have different businesses. In many cases, we have different family values, we have different interests, we recreate differently. And I think ultimately our dreams and goals and ambitions here are different than they are in other parts of California. And that goes back to the Citizens Redistricting Commission, is to make sure those communities of interest are kind of grouped together so that their voices are heard, right? And that's the important thing. And the way this has gone about, those voices are being silenced.
Now, among the farmers and ranchers we spoke to, water issues are a big concern. They want lawmakers who will be their voice in the fight over water rights. And Sarah, it's not just water rights alone, it's representation from these California Republicans all the way over in Washington.
It's going to be very interesting to see when these maps change, what the stories will be afterwards and how people's lives will change and what the issues will be. Lauren, thank you. We're going to be checking in with you a lot tonight. So, Devin, I know we've got some new results in on Prop 50 now.
Yeah, so Sarah, as you heard, just within 10 minutes of the polls closing here in California, CBS News felt confident enough to call this race in favor of Proposition 50. Here's some of the latest numbers. Now, admittedly, only 2% of the vote is in at this point, but there is it is leading by a wide margin, 73.6 to 26.4. A lot of votes still to be counted, but that margin gives you an indication of where this vote may ultimately be going. And as we mentioned earlier, just a few minutes after the polls closed tonight, CBS News was confident enough to declare victory for Proposition 50. Now, Prop 50 saw a ton of money pour into this race, drawing congressional maps that might seem a bit mundane, but as we have learned, it is enormously consequential with national implications. So it makes sense that the yes and the no crowds, they spent big to get their messages out. Governor Newsom has been the poster boy for Proposition 50, but he's not alone. Democratic heavy hitters from across the country have also jumped into the fray, including former President Barack Obama, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, as well as Senator Elizabeth Warren. The no side was represented by former Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, who championed the independent commission who drew the current maps. So which side did a better job of convincing would-be voters? Well, joining us to dive into some of those exit poll numbers is CBS Executive Director of Elections and Surveys, Anthony Salvanto. Anthony, thank you so much for joining us tonight. The polling before the election showed the yes campaign with a pretty commanding lead. What are the exit polls? What were they showing you tonight?
Hey there, Devin. So right off the top, let me tell you why we are so confident in what's going to happen here as the votes are coming in. The exit polls were very clear, and frankly, they looked a lot like those pre-election polls you mentioned, where there's a 24-point lead in the exit poll for yes. Plus, you see, even as votes are coming in now, and they're coming in pretty quickly, it's not every county, but the yes side is off to that early lead, which then just mirrors that trend. The other part was that the advance vote, what had come in even prior, was heavily, heavily Democratic. So that's why we can make the projection. Now, the other part of this, to your earlier question, is what was on voters' minds? Well, a couple of things. One is 53% of voters on this thought that neither party was handling redistricting fairly. Having said that, what we also saw was, especially for the yes side, was that the president was a factor, especially for Democrats. Of the people who voted yes in the exit poll, 80% of them said one reason was they saw it as a way to oppose President Trump. So nationalized in that respect. Yes, it's about redistricting, but they also had the president on their minds, Devin.
You know, is this, as you mentioned, kind of a Democrat versus Republican issue, a referendum, perhaps, as some of that data suggests, against the president? But what do you find when you look at the numbers in a deep blue county like San Francisco versus perhaps kind of a crimson red one like Lassen County?
Well, one of the things that you want to watch is once we get all this data in, I'm going to show you, just to remind folks, what California looks like on a straight Democratic Republican map. The best comparison is the 2024 presidential race, right? The counties around you, and many people may know, be familiar with, right, are deep blue. And all of them around San Francisco, in fact, all up and down the coast. This is Democratic territory. And for any Democrat or any Democratic-backed area or, measure, you're going to want to sort of run up the score in those areas. What's going to be interesting here as redistricting goes forward is there's going to be a lot of concern, and we had seen this in the pre-election polling, that as the districts are then redrawn, these rural areas through the Central Valley, out towards Sacramento, and including in Northern California, all of those districts will be redrawn such that the cities will be have more influence, they say, in those rural areas. And so that's been a big concern for the no side. Those are where the Republican areas are. Anyway, back to the current map, and you see the votes still coming in for yes. And all those blue areas I just showed you from the 2024 map, all of those places coming in yes, because Democrats are voting so heavily for it, Devin.
All right, Anthony Salvanto, thank you so much. We're waiting on more of those results. We did get the first batch of ballots. They are going to be released throughout the evening. We'll get a clearer picture maybe of the kind of the margin of victory for Proposition 50.
Yeah, I think that is a big question tonight. We're going to have to see, how the governor is feeling about things. He was confident going into this. I imagine he's going to be close to ecstatic now. Max Darrow's there, so we're going to be checking in.
Yeah, we're definitely keeping a close eye on when the governor's going to come out and speak. We will get right back out to that as soon as he does. We're also keeping an eye on when the votes start coming in, and we'll bring you those results ASAP.
Yeah, so as we mentioned earlier, this has been so far a really big night for Democrats. They've been pretty much sweeping back east, and there
California and nationwide,
many, many races. So we want to go to some of the other races tonight. We want to start with that very closely watched race for mayor of New York City. Democratic socialist Zohran Mamdani is projected to defeat former Governor Andrew Cuomo. This is something that would have been a major upset a year ago, a seismic shift in New York politics. Mamdani, the 34-year-old state lawmaker, will be the city's most liberal mayor in decades. Here are some live pictures from New York City tonight. An ecstatic crowd of supporters excited to hear Mamdani speak. He should be coming out momentarily. His campaign, as we've reported, really focused on the cost of living for New Yorkers. He won over voters promising free bus service, free childcare, and city-owned grocery stores, as well as a rent freeze. We're keeping an eye on that campaign party and basically waiting to hear when he's going to start speaking. We've got our eye on the podium. When Mr. Mamdani speaks, we'll bring that to you live. Also in New Jersey tonight, CBS News projects Democrat Mikey Sherrill will be the next governor, defeating her Republican challenger and someone who was a close ally of President Trump. The Congresswoman put opposition to the president at the forefront of her campaign, too, also focusing on cost of living. Sherrill will be the first female Democratic governor in the state's history. And over in Virginia, sort of a similar storyline. CBS News projecting Democrat Abigail Spanberger will defeat her opponent, the state's Republican lieutenant governor. Spanberger is a former congresswoman and CIA officer. She also focused her campaign on the economy and public safety. She gained support from big-name Democrats, including former President Barack Obama. She is set to make history as well as the state's first female governor. So very similar storylines. in terms of the kinds of candidates who are winning tonight, and also what their major issues were.
Yeah, tonight's election, especially some of the races that we're following across the country, were seen as a litmus test for the Democratic Party that's really still trying to find its footing after losing the presidency last year. And so for some of them, there was a feeling, is it the path moving towards the middle, towards moderation, or is it leaning perhaps to the left? New York and some of those other races give a decidedly muddy picture of what that might mean.
Yes, definitely a different picture on both ends of that spectrum. All right, more to come tonight on Prop 50. The results already in, but more votes being counted tonight. We're going to talk with experts on what this victory for Governor Newsom means for the state as well.
And a big money decision for voters in the South Bay. We're going to look at how Santa Clara County is hoping to raise hundreds of millions of dollars and where they plan to spend.
And good weather to get to the ballot box today, but we have storms on the way. Chief Meteorologist Paul Hagan has the first alert forecast.
And this is a live look from New York City. You see the newly elected mayor of New York at the podium.
But as Eugene Debs once said, I can see the dawn of a better day for humanity. For as long as we can remember, the working people of New York have been told by the wealthy and the well-connected that power does not belong in their hands. Fingers bruised from lifting boxes on the warehouse floor, palms calloused from delivery bike handlebars, knuckles scarred with kitchen burns. These are not hands that have been allowed to hold power. And yet over the last 12 months, you have dared to reach for something greater. Tonight, against all odds, we have grasped it. The future is in our hands. My friends, we have toppled a political dynasty. I wish Andrew Cuomo only the best in private life. But let tonight be the final time I utter his name as we turn the page rage on a politics that abandons the many and answers only to the few. New York, tonight you have delivered a mandate for change, a mandate for a new kind of politics, a mandate for a city we can afford, and a mandate for a government that delivers exactly that. On January 1st, I will be sworn in as the mayor of New York City. And that is because of you. So before I say anything else, I must say this. Thank you. Thank you to the next generation of New Yorkers who refuse to accept that the promise of a better future was a relic of the past. You showed that when politics speaks to you without condescension, we can usher in a new era of leadership. We will fight for you because we are you. Or as we say on Steinway, ana minkum wa ilaykum. Thank you to those so often forgotten by the politics of our city who made this movement their own. I speak of Yemeni bodega owners and Mexican abuelas, Senegalese taxi drivers and Uzbek nurses, Trinidadian line cooks and Ethiopian aunties. Yes, aunties. To every New Yorker in Kensington and Midwood and Hunts Point, know this. This city is your city, and this democracy is yours too. This campaign is about people like Wesley, an $11.99 organizer I met outside of Elmhurst Hospital on Thursday night. A New Yorker who lives elsewhere, who commutes 2 hours each way from Pennsylvania because rent is too expensive in this city. It's about people like the woman I met on the BX33 years ago, who said to me, I used to love New York, but now it's just where I live. And it's about people like Richard, the taxi driver I went on a 15-day hunger strike with outside of City Hall, who still has to drive his cab 7 days a week. My brother, we are in City Hall now. This victory is for all of them. And it's for all of you. The more than 100,000 volunteers who built this campaign into an unstoppable force. Because of you, we will make this city one that working people can love and live in again. With every door knocked, every petition signature earned, and every hard-earned conversation, you eroded the cynicism that has come to define our politics. Now I know that I have asked for much from you over this last year. Time and again, you have answered my calls. But I have one final request. New York City, breathe this moment in. We have held our breath for longer than we know. We have held it in anticipation of defeat. Held it because the air has been knocked out of our lungs too many times to count. Held it because we cannot afford to exhale. Thanks to all of those who sacrificed so much, we are breathing in the air of a city that has been reborn. To my campaign team.
All right, so you're listening there to the newly elected, the mayor-elect of New York City. Now, political labels, those can be a little slippery in terms of like what they actually describe. This has been a populist campaign from day one, and you heard that same populist message from the podium tonight.
Yeah, really an extraordinary shift in local politics in New York City. I want to go ahead and go to our experts now. Let's bring in Caroline Heldman, a political science professor, and Lonnie Chen, a fellow at the Hoover Institute. Guys, I'm going to go to you first, Caroline, and just with the preface that Governor Newsom is going to speak shortly after Mr. Mamdani is done speaking. Caroline, so many of the races seem to be, to the experts tonight, a referendum on Trump. Every time somebody brought national politics into this, Mr. Mamdani now kind of famously tried to bring it back to New Yorkers and what the local issues were. He really wanted to stick to the issues that mattered on the local level. But is this, in your mind, also a referendum on the presidency and the administration?
Well, it obviously is. I think if you look at how folks were running their campaigns, there were 4 major campaigns or races with national significance. Of course, Prop 50, which was overtly against Trump. If you look at how Mikey Sherrill ran in New Jersey against Jack Ciattarelli, it was very much an indictment of MAGA Republican Ciattarelli and a vote against Trump. That's what she asked voters to do. The same with Mamdani in New York. And so the only kind of centrist candidate we saw was Spanberger in Virginia. But it's 4 out of 4 for Democrats, and 3 of them specifically ran against Donald Trump. And in California, obviously, it would be Newsom running Prop 50 against Trump's efforts happening, in Texas. So a direct response to him. So I think this is a very clear sort of indictment of Trump's agenda, this first election out from the last 2024 race.
I want to ask you, Lonnie, so much of what's going on with Democrats right now has been who is going to lead the party into the future, right? Democrats have been totally disorganized in the wake of the 2024 election. Many have been critical of that. And now we have Governor Newsom, who's probably going to be celebrating a victory here in just a few minutes with the passage of Prop 50. And you see Mr. Mamdani, obviously different sort of political ends of the spectrum as far as Democrats go. But Lonnie, how do you see Mr. Mamdani and Governor Newsom's roles in the future of the Democratic Party, given the results tonight?
Well, I think it's yet to be determined. I think part of the challenge for parties that are out of power, and by and large, the Democrats are out of power now with control of neither chamber of Congress as well as the White House. I think they've got to figure out what their party is going to stand for and what it's going to look like as we move toward 2026 and 2028. I mean, even if you look at Mamdani on the one hand, and then the 2 gubernatorial candidates who won in New Jersey and Virginia, very different styles of governance, very different policy platforms, very different ends of the spectrum in terms of the Democratic Party. So we'll have to see where that fight comes out. But one thing we do know is that that battle is going to be joined very soon by people like Gavin Newsom in a very direct way, who are running for president in 2028, or we believe will run for president. And I think that primary battle over the next couple of years, that's going to be pretty definitional for the Democratic Party. And I think the big question that remains is, what is the Democratic Party aside from being a party that's against Donald Trump? That's really been the sort of modus operandi, the identity of the Democratic Party for some time now. And what is that going to look like as we go toward 2028? Is that going to be a party that continues to stand as opposition to Donald Trump, and that's going to define what their party is, or are they going to move in a different direction? So I think those are the kinds of questions that need to get answered over these next several years.
Yeah. Lonnie, I hear what you're saying, and we'll have to see. I think a lot of this definitely still has to sort of shake out. One very busy election night, and definitely sort of midterms ahead. I think a lot of people looking forward to that now. Caroline and Lonnie, thank you so much for your expertise. We'll be talking to you again soon. All right, Devin, obviously major news tonight, upset in the New York City mayor race, and now the passage of Prop 50.
Yeah, within the first 10 minutes after the polls closed tonight, we got definitive word from CBS News that Proposition 50 was going to pass. We're going to have much more on that after a short break.
We'll be right back. Welcome back to our special election night coverage as California voters decide on Prop 50 and whether to redraw the state's congressional maps ahead of next year's midterms.
Yeah, this is a look, Sarah, at some of the results that have come in. Now, as you know, we really within probably the first 10 minutes, even less, 5 minutes of the polls closing, we got some of the initial numbers, 64.8% to 35.2. That is even better than some of the early polling prior to election night. So performing pretty well, but we still have a number of the votes to be counted still. Max Darrow is in Sacramento, where the governor is set to speak any minute now. Max, we hear that he may be waiting for the newly elected mayor in New York to finish up. What are you hearing out there?
Yeah, that's exactly what we're hearing out here. Devin, everybody here is waiting eagerly to hear what Governor Gavin Newsom has to say now that Prop 50 has been greenlit by the voters. The atmosphere here, it is not a watch party or anything like that. It is very different than the scene that is unfolding right now at that party as the mayor-elect in New York is addressing a crowd. Here, it is all business, primarily just media members and big supporters of Prop 50. So as we've been talking about all night, Prop 50 is going to temporarily redraw the congressional maps here in California in a way to give the Democrats 5 more seats ahead of the midterm election. This, of course, was done as a countermeasure to what Texas Republicans did to give the GOP 5 more seats with redistricting there ahead of those midterm elections. Now, talking to some of the big proponents here of Prop 50, they felt confident going into the evening, and they tell me that the next step, their eyes are completely on 2026, and they hope that this brings momentum into that fight. Listen.
That this is about the 2026 election cycle, that we want to have free and fair elections. Today we had ICE in LA, special appearance, coming out in tactical battle gear to show people that they're going to be around for the elections. And I think for us, that fear needs to be dismayed by this election.
Again, we are expecting to hear from Governor Gavin Newsom any minute here in Sacramento. We are waiting for the mayor-elect of New York to finish. We hope to hear from him coming up after that, and we will bring you that coverage the second he gets up to this podium behind us. Devin, Sarah.
All right, Max, thank you very much. We're going to have to see if these early results, if they hold up. But right now, Proposition 50 is leading by, the yes on 50 is leading by a wide margin, almost 2-1 at this point. But let's go ahead and go now to Lauren Toms here. She's going to join us here momentarily. Lauren, California really isn't the only state that has taken on redistricting. This was something that was, of course, initiated by or in response to what Texas decided to do to their maps, but it's not stopping with California.
It definitely is not, Devin. As of tonight, it's really game on in this redistricting battle. About a dozen states are officially in this redistricting game, with others possibly joining in. Now, let's take a closer look at the national map. We color-coded these states to show which party is trying to gain an advantage. As you know, here in California, Democrats are looking to pick up 5 congressional seats to keep up pace with Texas. But other states, including New York and Illinois, may only be able to pick up about 1 seat each. Republicans are also hoping to gain 1 seat in Missouri and maybe a couple more in Ohio and Indiana. None of this, at the end of the day, is a slam dunk. Now, in some of these states, you also can expect legal challenges. At this point, it is not clear which party ends up with the advantage in 2026, Devin, which really brings me back to my absolute favorite political term, especially in this special election cycle, and that's dummy mandering. That dummy mandering is when the redistricting effort backfires on the party that really started this all in. Devin, we won't know if that takes effect until a year from now, when all of this is going to play out during the 26 midterms.
You know, I was struck when you said as many as a dozen states are perhaps looking to do this to their maps as well. I think what it perhaps underscores is maybe a need for some national standard so that we're not rewriting the rules in the middle of the game, like we are basically in the middle of a decade.
Certainly.
All right, Lauren Toms, thank you so much. All right, so we did hear a lot, from rural voters. There's people that say, there are winners and losers tonight, Sarah. And so at this point, we've got about 65% of the voters that we have seen thus far. They're saying yes on Proposition 50. You looked at those maps, right? There are places that were red congressional districts, as many as 5 of them, and they're going to essentially be losing potentially their representatives. And one of the concerns that we had heard is, well, what happens when you mix kind of an urban area with a more rural area? can the congressperson that represents that unified district do that justice?
Yeah, and I think with the agricultural community, there are real questions about that because their issues that they face are so vastly different. Let's go ahead and take another look at the shifts in the political landscape that Devin is talking about from Prop 50 here. And this is kind of what Lauren was showing you just a minute ago. On the left, the congressional representation before Prop 50, and then on the right, what it could look like if the election from 2024 were held with what could be these new maps. Some of the biggest impacts are going to be felt by voters in rural areas, as we've been talking about. Kayla Mueller is tracking those impacts in Yuba County for us. Hi, Kayla.
Yeah, hi there. Yuba County could see major changes, and I think that's what drove so many people to the polls tonight. A shift in congressional boundaries is not necessarily something most people want to see here, but not all. Both Yuba and Sutter counties will be directly impacted by redistricting. Currently, Yuba Sutter falls under District 1, represented by Republican Doug LaMalfa, and now Yuba Sutter would then switch to fall under District 4, which is currently represented by Democrat Mike Thompson. Many voters in this area feel very strongly about this proposition. A lot of no on 50 signs in yards. A lot of farmers have them up visible from the highway. I've been out in the community in both Yuba and Sutter counties a few times now, talking with people on the street about Prop 50, and many of them are worried about redistricting and what that might mean for farmers or the lifestyle up here. And Congressman LaMalfa agrees.
We have a rural lifestyle we like. We don't necessarily want a San Francisco lifestyle, but they will put that upon us, and we will have the representation that is the same as the urban area.
But not everyone feels that way. Some supporters of Prop 50 say it's the right move to counter Texas. We found 2 younger voters dropping off their yes ballots.
We voted together in the last election, which is why we did it again today. And yeah, we just want to make sure our voices are heard.
I think that people need to be more educated on why we're actually casting this vote, because yes, it can cause some problems if it wasn't for the right reasons, but it is.
Yeah, the polls are now closed here, and this polling site is turning into a ballot counting site. I talked to the county clerk for Yuba County earlier today, and she told me that she was impressed by the voter turnout. She says that it was pretty much on par with the presidential election. So I think that's a really good indication of how important going out and voting was here in this county.
Yeah, Kayla, we are seeing those high turnout numbers in races, not just in California, but really across the country. Thank you so much for your reporting live for us tonight. Devin?
Yeah, Sarah, we have a lot more election coverage tonight. High-profile races out east. We're taking a closer look at the race for mayor in New York City and 2 key races for governor.
And a small town in the North Bay with a big controversy on its hands about housing. We're tracking the recall vote for the top leaders in the town of Fairfax. New numbers showing the recall is failing right now. We'll be right back.
and at Democratic headquarters in Sacramento tonight. That is the podium at which we eventually expect Governor Gavin Newsom to speak at some point tonight. Now, we had heard that there was a little bit of political choreography that was going on, that out of respect for the newly elected mayor in New York, that the governor was not going to take to the podium tonight until the conclusion of the newly elected mayor in New York had wrapped up. Now, he did just wrap up a few minutes ago. And so the indications are that at any moment now we should be hearing from Governor Gavin Newsom. He has, of course, been the poster boy for Proposition 50. That has been the focus of his political life for the last couple of months. He has been an outspoken supporter of California's response to redistricting efforts in the state of Texas. Now, he has been joined by some heavy hitters in the Democratic Party, former President Barack Obama, AOC, as well as a Democratic senator from Massachusetts, Elizabeth Warren. This is, once again, a live picture in Sacramento tonight. And so we're going to go ahead and take a look while we're waiting on the governor, and we're going to cut right back to him as soon as he hits the podium tonight. But we do want to take a quick look at some of our other local races. Here is a look at Measure A, which would raise the sales tax in Santa Clara County. That money would go towards county hospitals and the healthcare system in the county to offset federal cuts. It is anticipated to raise about $330 million. And turning now to Fairfax, where voters are deciding on a potential recall of Mayor LaSalle Bash. These are the numbers right now: 55.5% no, 44.5% are voting yes on that recall. And that's 100% in, so that looks like the recall there has failed. Well, meantime, the Fairfax vice mayor also faced a recall, strangely enough, tonight. These are the results. They mirror the earlier one: 54.8% no, 45.2% yes. So both of those recalls up in Fairfax have, in fact, now failed, because we see there that 100% of the vote is in. Now, Sarah, as we had mentioned before, we were looking at that live podium. We were waiting for Governor Gavin Newsom to take to the podium at some point. We had heard that there was kind of a respectful choreography that was going on. He was going to wait for the newly elected mayor of New York to wrap up, which he did just a few moments ago. So now we're just waiting on the governor to see what he's going to say to take his victory lap tonight.
Yes, whether this was respect for his win or just more of a calculation about where eyeballs will be and not overlapping those speeches. Mr. Mamdani spoke for quite a while over there in New York to a very, very excited group of supporters and people who are working on his campaign, who he really made a centerpiece of his comments tonight, thanking them for all the work that he's done. He ran a very aggressive campaign over the past year, lots of social media, lots of talking to young people, going on podcasts, going to the national media, but really sort of doing things a little bit differently in a really grassroots effort there. So that was the focus of his comments.
A populist campaign that really, in the end, resonated with New York voters.
Yeah, who really were focused on affordability. Now, with the comments from Governor Newsom, we're going to expect to hear probably something about the Trump administration, about President Trump, about what's going on in Texas, and probably not too much about his political ambitions, although that will be the subtext of his commentary tonight. But we're probably going to hear really a victory lap now that Prop 50 has passed.
You know, one of the things that kind of surprised us, frankly, tonight is we kind of know sort of the tempo and the cadence of an election night. The polls close here in California. It's 8 o'clock, as you know. And then we typically expect maybe 20 to perhaps 30 minutes later, we start to get some of the results trickling in from early voting. And within 5 minutes, basically, CBS News was confident enough in the margin of victory here for Proposition 50 that they called the race.
Yeah, which probably tells you that there were a lot of early ballots, people voting by mail as they do in California. And we're probably going to be talking about turnout for quite a while. This is, not a major election year. It's not a presidential election. It's not a midterm election. It's a special election. Still, turnout in California on Prop 50, the results that you're seeing here with 64% of the vote in now, handily passing. And turnout is going to be really a cornerstone of the conversation that we have about this election in the days and the weeks ahead.
Yeah, that number, 64.6%, that's an even stronger showing than some of the polling that we saw prior to the election, which had the numbers at about 62 to 30 to 38. So if you think about that, that basically means, just to break it down for people that aren't great with math, If you've got 3 voters,
Yeah.
2 of them voted yes
Right.
tonight. That's basically what those numbers mean.
Right. And the people who were against Prop 50 got that last minute push from former Governor Schwarzenegger, who came out and was really sort of aggressively campaigning against this, saying that just because Texas doesn't do this, we should not do this, that he was a part of making sure that districting was fair and independent in the state of California. And his argument was that we should not change that, even if it were temporarily or for whatever reasons. But Governor Newsom obviously really made himself the face of this issue. And I think a lot of political analysts are going to say that this issue and his political aspirations are very closely tied together.
Yeah, absolutely. 2 points. We heard a little bit earlier in the evening from some Republicans who were at a watch party in the South Bay. And basically, they were saying that we know the numbers aren't great, but they were still hoping, I think perhaps against hope, that there was going to be a late surge, and that late surge basically did not come.
Not happen.
Now, we are once again looking at an empty podium where we expect any moment now for Governor Gavin Newsom to come to the podium, but we are going to sneak in a quick break. Before that, we'll be right back.
Wait, what?
All right, so that is a live look at Sacramento at the Democratic Party headquarters. That is a live picture. We are pointed in the direction in which we believe that Governor Gavin Newsom is going to be coming to the stage at any moment now, Sarah.
Yes,
Now,
a victory lap, if you will. Basically, this is his moment. He was assured now that Mr. Mamdani in New York had completed his comments, and there's a very safe bet that a lot of attention is going to be paid to what Governor Newsom says, not just about Prop 50, but with the subtext of this could be the beginning, the launch pad for a national campaign.
And as you see, there he is with his wife. He is approaching the microphone. Let's go ahead and listen in.
And let me underscore, it's been a good evening for everybody, not just the Democratic Party. But what a night for the Democratic Party. A party that is in its ascendancy. A party that's on its toes, no longer on its heels. From coast to coast, sea to shining sea. But it was not just a victory tonight for the Democratic Party, it was a victory for the United States of America, for the people of this country and the principles that our founding fathers lived and died for. And so we're proud. We're proud here in California to be part of this narrative this evening. We're proud of the work that the people of the state of California did tonight to send a powerful message to an historic president. Donald Trump is an historic president. He is the most historically unpopular president in modern history. In every critical category, Donald Trump is underwater. He promised to make us healthier. He promised to make us wealthier. We're sicker and poorer. And he fundamentally understands that. Why else would he call Greg Abbott saying he's entitled to 5 seats? Why else is he trying to rig the midterm elections before one single vote is even cast? He understands his position at this moment in the United States of America. One thing he never counted on, though, was the state of California. Instead of agonizing over the state of our nation, we organized in an unprecedented way in a 90-day sprint. People from all over the United States of America contributed their voices and their support for this initiative. We stood tall and we stood firm in response to Donald Trump's recklessness. And tonight, after poking the bear, this bear roared with an unprecedented turnout in a special election with an extraordinary result. None of us, however, are naive. This is a pattern. This is a practice. Donald Trump's efforts to rig the midterm election continue to this day. And I'll reinforce that in just a moment. You're seeing him take action all across this country, not just in Texas. You saw what they were able to do in Missouri, what they did in North Carolina, what they're trying to do in Indiana, and inevitably in Florida. They are not screwing around. In June of this year, we saw 4,000 National Guard federalized in the state of California. We saw 700 active duty Marines not sent overseas, but sent to the second largest city in the United States of America to militarize our streets. We said in June this was a preview of things to come. What more evidence do you need than what happened in Washington, D.C., what's happening up in Portland, cities like Chicago? When we kicked off this campaign just 90 or so days ago in Little Tokyo, in Southern California, in LA, at the Democracy Center, Donald Trump sent Greg Bovino. He sent his private police force that increasingly appears to have taken an oath of office to Donald Trump, not to the Constitution of the United States. He sent them to our kickoff rally to chill free expression, to chill free speech, to intimidate people from participating. Just today, in Los Angeles, Donald Trump called up the Border Patrol, sent them to Dodger Stadium, and threw a fastball at free speech, right at the head, free expression, to suppress the vote in America's second largest city. Just did that today. People in tactical gears sent out to intimidate a community that is already on edge. But you see, as we speak, people are still in line. People waiting up 3 hours to cast their vote, to send a message to Donald Trump. No crowns, no thrones, no kings. That's what this victory represents. It's a victory for the people of the state of California and the United States of America. And this is a victory that's punctuated with a sober reminder that it's not just the actions that Donald Trump has taken to federalize our guard, to begin the process of militarizing American cities, to intimidate free expression and speech by utilizing ICE and Border Patrol in American cities. But he also announced today, right when polls were opening, that this election was rigged. That this election was rigged. Of course, those are familiar words. It's exactly what Donald Trump said after January 6th, that day of love, where he tried to light democracy on fire. He tried to wreck this country, and he called in to the Secretary of State in Georgia, calling up for 11, 12,000 votes, just like he called Greg Abbott, saying he's entitled to those 5 seats. He said this election was rigged, and he's moving to look for criminal prosecution and investigations at the Department of Justice. He is not screwing around. So tonight, I'm proud, but I'm very mindful and sober of the moment we are living in. Donald Trump does not believe in fair and free elections, period and full stop. This is not complicated, and it's self-evident to anyone paying attention. You start to stack up all of these actions that continue to this moment and will continue in moments to come. If you think I'm exaggerating, consider his announcement just a few weeks ago to send rapid response teams all across the United States, in all 50 states, tens of thousands of members of the military prepared for urban deployment. A preview of things to come. But back to this state. Our state of mind was resolute. Our state of mind was resolved to stand firm and to stand tall, to not be intimidated, to not be humiliated, to not fall prey to cynicism, to not fall prey to fear and the anxiety of someone that believes in only one thing, shock and awe, to intimidate and exhaust us. But we're seeing all across this country, 7 million people strong, standing up, not just for themselves, but for each other and for these enduring and historic principles of our founding fathers. And I'll end on that. Next year is the 250th anniversary of the best of Roman Republic, the best of Greek democracy. This fundamental notion of a system of checks and balances, of popular sovereignty, the rule of law. Mr. President, the rule of law, not the rule of dawn. And I hope it's dawning on people. The sobriety of this moment, what's at stake. Tonight, as I said, is an extraordinary moment for our party, but again, it's an extraordinary moment affirming those principles. Our founding fathers did not live and die to see the kind of vandalism to this republic and our democracy that Donald Trump is trying to perpetuate. And so my call tonight, in the spirit of Whitman, we talked about the powerful play goes on. We all must contribute a verse. And so we need the state of Virginia. We need the state of Maryland. We need our friends in New York, in Illinois, in Colorado. We need to see other states, the remarkable leaders that have been doing remarkable things, meet this moment head on as well, to recognize what we're up against in 2026. And let me make this crystal clear. We can de facto end Donald Trump's presidency as we know it the minute Speaker Jeffries gets sworn in as Speaker of the House of Representatives. It is all on the line, a bright line in 2026. And so I want to thank everybody that stood up, not just for our democracy, but stood up for those that have feel bullied and intimidated, stood up for this notion of co-equal branches of government and a system of checks and balances. And I want to thank my wife, who reminds me every single day that this is about those that feel alone, those that feel isolated, those that feel an anxiety and a stress that they never could have imagined in their lives. This was about saying to them, we have your back, we see you, you matter, we care. And I'll just say this, I'm confident as we move forward into 2026 in this country, the best is yet to come. Thank you very much.
All right, that was the governor speaking in Sacramento. Very interesting remarks, Devin. So we were wondering if this was going to be sort of celebratory, if this was going to be a victory lap. I think it was very decidedly not that. It was more of a stern, reflective moment, and definitely sounded like somebody who might potentially be interested in running against a Republican come 2028.
Yeah, it was a victory lap. Make no mistake about that. But it was also a call to action, in which he framed this as an issue that was not just relevant to California, but relevant to the country.
Yes. All right. So we're so much to talk about tonight. We're going to continue our coverage coming up after this short break. Stay with us on this election night. Pause that. We're not going to take a break just yet.
Too much is going on to take a break at this point.
Too much is going on.
We have much more coming up tonight on all of the issues on this special election night.
Absolutely.
Election night across California.
Prop 50 is foundational if we're going to save this republic.
Voters decide on sweeping changes to the congressional map.
What they want to do is take us backwards.
As states around the country rush to redraw.
We're fighting fire with fire, and we have to make sure that the playing field is level.
California makes its call.
They hate Trump, so they think, well, I hate Trump, so let me do something bad to hurt Trump.
On who represents us in Washington.
It is election night across the country. There has been a major theme that is developing. Big wins for Democrats and voters pushing back against President Donald Trump. Good evening. I am Devin Feely.
I'm Sarah Donchi. Voters in California using Prop 50 to counter the Trump agenda and fight back against efforts to stack the midterm elections against Democrats. We do have our team diving into all of it tonight. So much to keep up with. We've got Max Darrow up in Sacramento, where we just heard from Governor Gavin Newsom. Max has more on his comments after the passage of Prop 50.
And CBS Executive Director of Elections and Surveys, Anthony Salvato, he is standing by with some fresh insight into the mindset of voters tonight.
And our Lauren Thompson in the studio with us. She has really been focused on Prop 50 for the past couple of weeks and how it changes the maps in California.
All right, but let's go ahead and start off with some of the latest numbers on Prop 50. Now, this one was an easy call for CBS News. The decision desk, CBS, would call this race shortly after 8 o'clock. It seemed like the polls closed at 8 o'clock, and within just a few minutes, then we got a definitive victory. Right now, it's 64.7% to 35.3%. Some of the initial polling prior to the election had the yes vote on Proposition 50 at about 62%. And so it's performed even better than the expectation was coming into election night. Basically, for anyone that might be a little bit challenged with math, if you have 3 voters, 2 out of those 3 voters voted yes on that tonight. This will give California the ability to redraw their congressional maps, hopefully pick up 5 additional seats in Congress. That is, the hope is that that would nullify the efforts made by Texas, which is where all of this began, Sarah.
All right, Devin, thank you so much. We obviously just heard from the governor. We want to welcome in Representative Kevin Kiley, first elected to represent the 3rd District of California. Congressman, I know that district is one that will be reshaped by Prop 50. Your thoughts on what has gone on tonight and this sort of handily passage of Prop 50 by California voters?
Yeah, so the people of California have clearly spoken, and I think, for me, the biggest takeaway from this is that we really need a national solution here. I think gerrymandering is a bad thing. I think the people of California agree that gerrymandering is a bad thing, and I'm against it in Texas, I'm against it in Virginia and North Carolina, and all of these other states. And so I actually have introduced legislation in Congress to say no gerrymandering in the middle of the decade, like we're seeing in this redistricting war all across the country right now.
There were Democrats that were sort of very much against gerrymandering and redistricting prior to this issue, at least. How will this, in your mind, affect your constituents?
Well, it is unfortunate because I love my district. I think it's the most beautiful district in California. And under Prop 50, it'll be split in 6 different directions. And so I think that's unfortunate and destabilizing. But, I actually have a history of getting votes from Democrats and Republicans alike. I actually got the 2nd most crossover votes in this last election of any competitive race in the country, meaning people who voted for Kamala Harris for president, that voted for me for representative. So I think I'll have a strong case for re-election, whatever the map looks like. But also, an important thing to note about Prop 50 is that in addition to bringing back gerrymandering in California, it also establishes a state policy calling for independent redistricting nationwide. And so I'm really planning to act on that call to action by working with folks across the aisle in Congress to find a solution to end this plague on our democracy of gerrymandering, which has been around in the country for a long time, but has really reached peak levels right now.
Your future, your political future, what are your thoughts and your plans as we look past this moment? What can you tell us?
Yeah, so I'm planning to run for re-election to the House because, I ran in the first place because I believe that our state is worth fighting for. And I promise to fight for all Californians and to be an independent voice for my district and to work to overcome the political divisions that are doing such harm to our country. And I think that mission is more important now than ever. So, as I said, my district is actually split 6 different ways. So I'm going to have to talk with my constituents and folks and to see what the best path forward is. But I'll definitely be seeking re-election to the House.
All right. Well, Congressman Kiley, thank you so much for your time tonight. I know this is probably a very disappointing night for you, but as you mentioned, the voters in California have spoken. Thank you, sir. Devin?
You bet.
Thank you, Sarah. Prop 50 saw a ton of money pour into this race. Drawing congressional maps, it might seem a bit mundane, but as we have learned, it is enormously consequential with national implications. So it just makes sense that the yes and the no crowds, they spent big to get their messages out. Governor Newsom has been the poster boy for Proposition 50. He's not alone, however. Democratic heavy hitters from across the country have also jumped into the fray. That includes former President Barack Obama, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, as well as Senator from Massachusetts, Elizabeth Warren. Now, the no side was represented by former Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, who had championed the independent commission who drew the current maps, the ones that we are now tossing aside. All right, so which side did a better job of convincing would-be voters to vote for them? Joining us now to dive into some of the exit poll numbers is CBS Executive Director of Elections and Surveys, Anthony Salvano. Thank you again for joining us here. And there was strong indications even before tonight, but the decision by the news desk to call this race, it came pretty quickly. Walk us through it.
I called this fast because it was very clear from the exit poll, from the advance vote, that this was trending heavily toward, and you can see this, very lopsided win for yes. That enabled the call to come quickly, but you can see here as the counties fill in, the way this played out, it tells a really partisan story, Devin, which is, again, as expected, because along the coast, where you get a lot of Democratic voters, well, that's a place where the yes numbers really ran up the score. In the interior of California, through the Central Valley and then up to the north, not as many voters there, a little more rural, also more Republican voters. That was more the no side, but clearly in this case outnumbered. Of course, the implications here as well is that when these districts are redrawn, a lot of those rural areas may well be merged in with the more urban areas and the coasts in some of those districts. So, of course, that was a part of the concern there along the Central Valley and elsewhere. That's how you got the call so fast. So I do want to show you this because, as we said, there are national implications to all of this. One of the reasons that people who voted yes said they voted yes was to counter, I mentioned the partisanship here, this is especially from Democrats, to counter Republicans in other states. So they had these national implications on their minds, Devin.
All right, some very interesting numbers. Now, as we said, about 2 out of every 3 voters voted in favor of this. I'm curious, you kind of outlined it a little bit, but let's go into let's do a deeper dive. So you got very, very deeply blue counties in San Francisco. You've got redder counties either in the Central Valley or northern. What does it look like in those areas?
Okay, so let's just go to the area around you, right? San Francisco, 84%, okay? Alameda, 80%. These are the kinds of numbers that a Democratic-backed measure like this or a Democrat running statewide is going to want. So, you know, if I pull up the history, I'll just show you the 2024 president by comparison, right? These are places, and I can sort of pick each one, where you get the same sort of patterns, where you get the ones that, in this case, Kamala Harris won. I'll point to San Mateo here. Again, sort of a similar percentage. That's the kind of pattern that you see unfold, and that's also how it explains the race, but it also helps you project the race, right? So the other part of this, if you want to do more of a deep dive through the counties around you, there's your numbers in Marin. Again, similar to what Kamala Harris got, what you might expect for Democrats. I'll go down to, I gave you Alameda. I'll go down to Santa Cruz here. Again, similar pattern. You get the idea. Lopsided numbers in heavily Democratic counties, Debbie.
All right, Anthony, thank you so much. Not only are those deeply Democratic areas, they're also population centers. Anthony, thank you. Now, all right, Sarah?
All right, Devin, thank you so much. Obviously, this was a loss for the No on 50 camp. They were pushing hard, especially towards the end there. CBS was at a watch party in Los Gatos this evening. Lauren Toms has been following this race for the past several weeks. Really hotly contested. Obviously, this fell the way that the governor wanted it to go.
And honestly, Sarah, even more so, a vast majority of California voters are in favor of this measure. And now that it's passed, California has been greenlit to redraw its congressional maps that would lean more in favor of Democrats. Now, we heard from Republicans in Los Gatos who say this fight is not over just yet.
We did our best, and I think it's put in the effort. But it is the result is it is what it is, and if they will continue to have more fight later on in terms of whether this is constitutional, what Newsom did with this special election, we'll have to see about that.
So what's next now that Prop 50 is headed for victory? As we've been showing you all night long on the map, congressional district lines will now be drawn to favor Democrats and will look more like what you're seeing on the right here. The next big battle ahead for Democrats is the midterm elections next year, almost exactly 1 year from now, which could decide the balance of power in Washington if it all goes according to the Prop 50 plan. Now, California Democrats should be able to pick up 5 more seats in the House of Representatives. But among the Republicans, they are in danger of losing their seats. That's Congressman Kevin Kiley, representing parts of the Sierra Nevada and the suburbs of Sacramento, and Congressman Doug LaMalfa, whose district includes Butte and Sutter and other rural areas to the north. Now, Sarah, this is exactly the nightmare that Congressman LaMalfa and Kiley have been really fearful of this whole time. They've been championing for more representation for their constituents, and now that representation for Republicans in Washington is going to be dwindling.
Yeah, and we'll have to see what other states do, right? There's a lot of game to be played, as they say. Lauren, thank you so much. Plenty to come tonight. More on some of the other big races from across the country, including New York's race for mayor.
Yeah, Sarah, a very dynamic situation. Here's another look at Proposition 50, 64.7% to 35.3%, a clear margin of victory. And we're going to check the numbers on Measure A in Santa Clara County as well. Looks like the yes vote has it at this point. We have 61% of the vote in, with 57% voting yes, 43% no. That is for health care money in Santa Clara County.
Well, it's been a big night for Democrats back east. We want to start with the closely watched race for mayor in New York. Democratic socialist Zoran Mamdani is projected to defeat former Governor Andrew Cuomo. He has given his victory speech tonight. It's a seismic shift in New York politics. Mamdani, just 34 years old, a state lawmaker, will be the city's most liberal mayor in decades.
My friends, we have toppled a political dynasty. I wish Andrew Cuomo only the best in private life. But let tonight be the final time I utter his name as we turn the page on a politics that abandons the many and answers only to the few.
In New Jersey, CBS News projects Democrat Mikey Sherrill will be the next governor, defeating the Republican challenger, who is an ally of the president. The Congresswoman put opposition to the president at the forefront of her campaign and also focused on cost of living issues. She'll be the first female Democratic governor in that state's history. And in Virginia, CBS News projects that Democrat Abigail Spanberger will defeat her opponent, the state's Republican lieutenant governor. Spanberger is a former congresswoman and CIA officer who centered her campaign also on the economy, and she talked a lot about public safety. Spanberger gained support from big-name Democrats, including former President Barack Obama, and she will also make history as the state's first female governor. Okay, let's go ahead and bring in once again Caroline Heltman, a political science professor, and Lonnie Chen, a fellow at the Hoover Institution. Okay, so between the race for mayor in New York and all of the governor's races, Lonnie, what do you think the lesson should be for Democrats and Republicans tonight?
Well, I think the most important thing is to understand that voters still care very much about their pocketbooks. I think if you look at the economic conditions that drove the victories for Mamdani, as well as for the gubernatorial candidates in New Jersey and Virginia, as you noted in that setup, they ran campaigns largely looking at the cost of living. Yes, they tried to draw contrast with Donald Trump, but really at the end of the day, for those candidates, it was about demonstrating that they had a plan to deal with economic issues. And I think that, for Democrats, is going to be the key to success in 2026 and beyond. I think the reality is that a lot of Democratic candidates have not been able to focus on those issues, have not really had a plan on those issues. And that's why in some cases they've been unsuccessful. So going forward, I think there's a little bit of a blueprint here, not in terms of ideology, but in terms of the issue set that candidates have to be responsive to if they want to be successful.
Yeah, perhaps some lessons learned for Democrats after the 2024 election in that sense, Lonnie. Caroline, I want to ask you, I hope you got a chance to listen to Governor Newsom's comments after the passage of Prop 50. He really sort of made some choices there to sort of frame this as a really stern moment, democracy at stake. He focused so much of his commentary on President Trump and sort of defeating some of his policies and ideologies. What did that speech sound like to you, given his larger political aspirations?
Well, I think it sounded like he's running for the presidency. He's actually made that pretty clear in recent weeks. He gave an interview where he did acknowledge that he was interested in running. He is obviously using Prop 50 as that platform. He's made it a national issue. He has made Democrats across the nation, I think, happy that he is standing in opposition to Donald Trump, given that the Republicans control so much of the federal government, and Donald Trump is constantly pushing to expand presidential power in ways that are making a majority of Americans uncomfortable. We see Newsom pushing back and really making this a national campaign. And it is, because it's about whether or not we can have free and fair elections come the midterms. And Donald Trump came out of the gate really clearly going to Texas saying, look, we want to shift the playing board and we want to rig it in favor of Republicans. And Newsom came out and said, I'm going to rig it in favor of Democrats, and using that platform. But it's clear he has aspirations for the presidency come 2028.
Just very briefly, final thoughts here, Lonnie. Now that Prop 50 has passed, you heard Governor Newsom sort of call as a call to action for some of the other states to perhaps follow suit. This always seemed like it was going to be this cascading effect of other states redistricting, and then where are we when sort of everyone has done this? What do you think happens next here for red states and blue states now?
Well, I do think you're going to see a number of different states consider redistricting efforts. States like Indiana, the governor mentioned that, for example, Florida, New Hampshire. You've got some other states where there could be some optionality around redistricting. The reality is that, everything's probably going to wash out, right? We knew Democrats kind of had an advantage going into 2026, generally speaking, in a president's midterm. The out party gained seats anyway. So it's not clear to me that all this back and forth is going to end up resulting in a whole lot more than the outcome we probably were going to get anyway. So we'll see. There are a lot more chess pieces to be played by Republicans going forward, because remember, Republicans have control of more state legislatures. So we'll see how it all washes out. Not every state is going to do it, but more chapters yet to be written before the election next year.
Yeah, and certainly a response we can expect from the Trump administration after tonight. Lonnie, Caroline, thank you for your analysis. We appreciate it. All right, Devin, very busy night tonight.
Yeah,
Lots to keep
very
track of.
dynamic, and we're going to follow all of it as it unfolds tonight. So stay with us.
Yes. Also tonight, flames shooting into the sky after a deadly plane crash at the Louisville airport. We're following the latest developments there, too.
Yeah, and if that wasn't enough, we have rain coming in tomorrow. We're going to look at the first alert forecast with Chief Meteorologist Paul Hagan. Welcome back to this special election night coverage here on Pix Plus.
We're going to have more coverage as the results from Prop 50 are still being counted. But first, let's take a look at our primetime headline.
Yes, Harold. Federal charges have been filed against the suspect accused of driving a U-Haul truck at a Coast Guard security personnel about 2 weeks ago. Federal prosecutors say the driver was identified as 26-year-old Brendan Thompson, also known as Bella. She has been charged with assault with a deadly weapon on a federal officer. Came after a day of protest near Coast Guard Island. A man was found guilty of murder of an elderly Asian woman in San Francisco. The jury convicted Keontae Gathron of multiple charges tied to a series of violent crimes that appeared to target Asian Americans. On January 8th of 2019, Yik Oh Wong was found brutally beaten and robbed at a playground in Visitation Valley. She died from her injuries a year later. He could face life in prison. At least 7 people are confirmed dead and 11 others are injured after a UPS plane crashed shortly after takeoff near the Louisville airport in Kentucky. This is a look at the fiery aftermath, which officials say is about the size of a city block. Officials say the jet was carrying 38,000 gallons of jet fuel and that they are still trying to contain the flames. The cause of that crash is still under investigation.
Tomorrow is a first alert day as an atmospheric river is going to bring rain and wind to the Bay Area. That moisture has been aimed at Oregon and the north coast of California for the past few days. Now that moisture is going to be aimed more squarely at the Bay Area, but this is going to be on the lower end of the atmospheric river scale for our neck of the woods. But it's still going to bring some heftier rainfall rates for a brief period of time and some gusty winds as well. Futurecast tonight and tomorrow shows that heavy rain for far northern California sneaking down towards the Bay Area, but not long enough to lead to any significant flooding threat, but it's still going to be a sloppy morning commute. We look at the rainfall pattern, how much is going to add up, and the whole Bay Area stays in that shade of green, which indicates less than 2 inches of total rain, much more than that, 2 to 4 inches of total rainfall for parts of northern California. And there's going to be quite a bit of wind energy with this, a wind advisory for almost the entire Bay Area, even a high wind warning for the coast of the North Bay, high wind warnings for the north coast as well, where gusts could exceed 50 to 60 miles an hour. We'll come back with an hour-by-hour look at Futurecast for just the Bay Area in just a few minutes.
All right, we look forward to that. Thank you, Paul. Still ahead tonight, more on Prop 50. We're breaking down the results and have continuing coverage for you right after this break.
Plus, we have a look at how this ballot measure is part of a nationwide rush to redraw and reshape power in Congress.
And we are also waiting on more updates on Prop 50 and other races across the country. Welcome back to our extended special election night coverage. A big night for California's redistricting measure. Voters overwhelmingly approved Prop 50. That is going to redraw the state's congressional maps ahead of the midterms.
Yeah, they called the race, Sarah, about 5 minutes after the polls first closed at 5 o'clock.
Quickly.
At 8 o'clock, almost surprised us a little bit. You can see the numbers, 64.7% in favor, and that is 35.3. This was a big victory from Governor Gavin Newsom. Max Darrow has been in Sacramento all day, all night long with the governor, who spoke about 30 minutes ago. Max?
He sure did. And, you know, the atmosphere here at the Democratic Party headquarters in Sacramento, it was all business from the get-go. This wasn't a big party like we saw in New York, for example, with the new mayor-elect there. It was in and out business. Even when the governor did address the media here in a brief press conference, it wasn't this big celebratory moment. It was a moment where he used it as a platform to, one, continue to rebuke the Trump administration and their actions as he has. He's been one of the most vocal critics of President Trump since the moment he took office for a second term. That all continued in Newsom's address tonight. But on top of that, he did say this was a moment for Californians to celebrate. And he said that was because this isn't just a win for Californians. The governor called this a win for the nation in its attempts to push back against the Trump administration. Looking towards the 2026 midterm elections, that's where his eyes are set, and that's where many other Democrats' eyes are set right now. That's the whole point of this redistricting effort. Now, that all being said, the governor did invoke the founding fathers, saying they didn't live and die for the Trump administration's actions. It really did feel more than just like a victory speech for a ballot measure that the governor was backing. It had a bigger sense than that. Let's listen to what some of the governor had to say.
Donald Trump. He is the most historically unpopular president in modern history. In every critical category, Donald Trump is underwater. He promised to make us healthier. He promised to make us wealthier. We're sicker and poorer. And he fundamentally understands that. Why else would he call Greg Abbott saying he's entitled to 5 seats? Why else is he trying to rig the midterm elections before one single vote is even cast? He understands his position at this moment in the United States of America. One thing he never counted on, though, was the state of California. Instead of agonizing over the state of our nation, we organized in an unprecedented way.
So in that 1 minute that you just heard the governor speak, that was his tone for just about the entirety of his remarks when he did address the crowd tonight here at the Democratic Party's Watch headquarters here in Sacramento. So that's just a little bit of a sense of what we experienced here tonight. And there's going to be a lot more of that to come from Governor Gavin Newsom, likely, as we get closer and closer to the 2026 midterm elections. Devin, Sarah?
Yeah, Max, as you mentioned, sober, not celebratory, but what we know of the governor is that he is a fighter, and he did get some jabs and he did get some punches in on President Trump. Max Darrow in Sacramento. Thank you so much, Max. Sarah, let's go to you.
All right, Devin, obviously a lot is going to change now, and let's take another look at the shifts in the political landscape in California that Prop 50 is going to bring now. So on your left, the congressional representation before Prop 50, and then on the right, what it could look like if the election from 2024 were held with what will be these new maps. Julie Watts joining us now from Sacramento. Julie, I know you talked with one of the people who was really key and instrumental to these new maps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he helped draw these new maps. It was his firm that actually drew these new maps. And in Paul's own words, he says the only reason that Prop 50 was so successful in California, a state that really led the way on independent redistricting, is because Democrats promised that this would be temporary. That was how they got the support and the votes that they needed. But of course, watchdogs, the critics, they say that's far from guaranteed. And so really the question is, will the supermajority Democratic legislature really allow control of drawing these maps to go back to that independent commission in 5 years, or will these special elections be the new norm? And so that is the question that we pose to Paul Mitchell, the man behind our new map. I think a lot of folks are saying, including people from that independent commission, that they don't think it is temporary.
Well, I can tell you this. 12% of voters in polling want to eliminate the Independent Redistricting Commission. There's a lot of support for it. The only way that you were able to get voters to hold these two concepts in their head at the same time, I support independent redistricting and I'm willing to vote for Prop 50, was their knowledge that this was going to be temporary. It was dealing with an existential crisis that's like a one-time national crisis.
But what if it's a new existential crisis?
Yeah, you
or
mean
at least
Gavin Newsom is going to Texas telling Republicans to flip seats? No, there is not.
Who knows what it could be?
But nevertheless.
So if the legislature, if the new governor, and if our now governor, potentially future president, comes to you in 5 years and says, I want you to redraw these maps again, we're going to go back to the voters and ask them to extend it, will you draw those maps?
It will never happen, and I would tell them to pound sand.
So we can get you on the record, you will not draw those maps.
Of course I wouldn't. I've never done a partisan redistricting in my life. The only reason we did this is because it's a one-time thing, because it embraces national redistricting reform, it goes back to the commission, and it's triggered by what Donald Trump is doing in Texas. This is a one-time exercise.
Well, one thing seems to be for certain, he won't be the one drawing that new map if they bring it back to voters 5 years from now. Notably, just because the new map indicates that there could be 5 new Democratic seats doesn't necessarily mean we are sending 5 Californians to Congress. 3 of them are very strong. Paul says there's 2 of them that really could go either way. It is going to be a tough fight. We're also likely going to see more Republicans on Republicans in the midterm elections. So it's going to be interesting. It's really, this new map is going to do a lot more than just turn a few districts more blue.
Yeah, Julie, I don't think he left a lot of space for interpretation there. Thank you for asking those questions on our behalf. We appreciate you, as always, in your reporting. All right, Devin.
All right, Sarah, so let's go ahead to Lauren Toms. Lauren, California really isn't the only state. This obviously began with Texas. California's response was to what Texas did, but you said that there's many other states that are basically considering using this same playbook.
Very much so, Devin. And as of tonight, it's really game on. About a dozen other states are now in the redistricting game, with others possibly joining in. Now, let's take a closer look at the national map. We color-coded the states to show which party is trying to gain an advantage. As you know, here in California, Democrats are trying to pick up 5 congressional seats to keep pace with Texas. But other states, including New York and Illinois, may only be able to pick up about 1 seat each. Republicans, on the other hand, are hoping to gain 1 seat in Missouri and maybe a couple more in Ohio and Indiana. And all of this is not a slam dunk. In some of these states, you have legal challenges to come. And at this point, it is not clear which party ends up with the advantage in 2026, Devin, which brings me once again to my absolute favorite political term right now. That is called dummy mandering, Devin. That is when all of this backfires in these districts, these seats that whichever party, Democrat or Republican, we're trying to pick up, that actually backfires and it stays with the party that is in control right now. So again, none of this is a slam dunk, and we don't know how this is going to go next year. Just like Julie was saying, a few of these districts, even here in blue California, could really go either way.
Yeah, the hope is 5 for the Democrats.
That's right.
But you're saying that it's no guarantee, and we won't know until basically this time next year. All right, so stick around. We have a lot more election coverage tonight, high-profile races out east. And we're also taking a closer look at the race for mayor in New York and 2 key races for governor. And thank you for staying with us for our special election night coverage. A quick look at some of our other local races. Here is a look at Measure A, which would raise the sales tax in Santa Clara County. That money would go towards county hospitals. It is passing at this point with 75% of the vote in, 57 to 43. And turning now to Fairfax, where voters are deciding on a potential recall of the mayor and the vice mayor. This is for the mayor, 55.5% voting no on that recall. Some people wanted to recall the mayor over plans for a new 6-story building that was proposed to meet state housing goals. The Fairfax vice mayor, as we mentioned, was also facing a recall tonight. This one is also failing by essentially the same margin, 54.8% to 45.2%. Now, big news in the race for mayor of New York City. Democratic Socialist Zohran Mamdani defeated former Governor Andrew Cuomo in a landmark election. Mamdani coming in at just above 50% at this point. Cuomo had 42%. And Republican challenger Curtis Sliwa a distant third with 7% in a 3-man race. 91% of the vote have been counted so far. Gwen Bumgarner joins us live. And Gwen, Zohran Mamdani is expected to usher in a new era of politics in the Big Apple, making some big promises during his campaign.
Yeah, he really has. He has positioned himself as a change maker, and New Yorkers were really receptive to that. I think tonight that is clear. He's had some bold initiatives, things like free childcare, free access to city buses, also implementing a wealth tax in the city. The latter of those things, he would have to get approval from the state legislature. So that it may be an uphill battle, but he's got big ideas that people, again, were very receptive to tonight. Up until tonight, things that he was successful at was galvanizing a base. There were a ton of young voters who went and turned in early ballots. He had a grassroots campaign. We saw him even before the primary really hitting the pavement, getting that face-to-face exposure with potential voters. And also, he's leaned into social media in a way that neither of the other two candidates did. When you take a look at maybe even TikTok, he's got 1.7 million followers. Compare that to Andrew Cuomo, who has not even 15,000 followers. So he really found a way to get exposure throughout the campaign. And looking at tonight, he really kind of reflected back on his journey. Here's what he had to say following a concession from Andrew Cuomo.
When we enter City Hall in 58 days, expectations will be high. We will meet them. Together, we will usher in a generation of change. And if we embrace this brave new course, rather than fleeing from it, we can respond to oligarchy and authoritarianism with the strength it fears, not the appeasement it craves.
So a historic race and some historic voting numbers, especially when it came to, again, that early voting, Devin.
You know, the Democrats, Gwen, after the 2024 presidential election, they were somewhat flat-footed. They were in disarray. These are really some of the first elections since that time. And I think a lot of people were looking to these races, seeing if they would be a roadmap perhaps for the midterms. Now, the Democrats, they have wins that are projected in some of the governor's races in Virginia, New Jersey. What can we sort of expect kind of projecting forward another year to the midterms?
Well, that's the thing. Even if you are not living in one of those East Coast areas, everybody's eyes are kind of turned toward them because they are the latest batch of data that we have compared to what we saw last year. So there are two things that people expected to look at. And one, that was, would these races be kind of this barometer of Trump's second presidency? And also to gauge whether or not Democrats have improved in their standings. And so I think I heard that right there.
I know your struggles. I know your hopes. I know your dreams. So serving you is worth any tough fight I have to take on, and I am incredibly honored to be your next governor.
Okay, that was one of those races I was talking about. That was Mikey Sherrill. She was in a very, very tight race for the New Jersey governorship. She's the Democrat who won over Jack Ciattarelli. And that race was really neck and neck kind of going into tonight. We know that New Jersey is a reliable blue state, but as for the governorship, it's seen as kind of a seesaw in terms of political party. It does go back and forth. So that is a race that those political pundits are looking to maybe extrapolate and analyze in the months to come ahead of the midterms. And then the other thing that I want to look at tonight was that other gubernatorial race in Virginia. Continuing to see a big win tonight for Democrats, where we saw Abigail Spanberger. She was the Democrat in that race, a former Congresswoman, and she is the projected winner over the current Lieutenant Governor, Winsome Earl Sears. Now, this vote was really historic today because moving forward, this will be the first female governor in the state of Virginia. So a very exciting night because there were lots of big moments happening all across the East Coast. Devin.
All right, Gwen, thank you very much. A big win for Democrats tonight. As we know, a year until the midterms, and that is a small eternity in political time. But Gwen, thank you so much for your time. Now let's go ahead and get a check of our weather. Rain and wind, they are on the way. Chief Meteorologist Paul Hagen gives us a look.
We've got rain and wind headed for the Bay Area, courtesy of a storm system that has been directing quite a bit of moisture towards the Pacific Northwest over the past few days. Now that moisture is going to be swinging down closer to us and see another surge of clouds out over the Pacific that is approaching the coast of far northern California, but that's going to swing down towards the Bay Area as we head through tonight and tomorrow. Likely the rain isn't going to move in until after midnight tonight. So let's take a look at Futurecast, and this first animation just takes us through 4 o'clock tomorrow morning. See a few hit or miss showers for the North Bay. Those are mostly going to evaporate on the way down, but the actual rain is going to be moving in before the sun comes up on Wednesday morning. And this is where the heaviest rain is going to fall. So if we do get any localized flooding problems, it likely would be in the North Bay right around the peak of rush hour, with that rain moving farther and farther into the rest of the Bay Area throughout the morning commute. So allow plenty of extra time. If you have the option to work from home, I would exercise that option if you can, because it's not only going to be wet, it's also going to be windy. We'll talk about that more in just a second. Winding the clock forward to lunchtime, well, it's still going to be unsettled, but the showers start to become a little fewer and farther between as we head through the afternoon and into tomorrow evening. The heaviest rain moves off to the east by sunset, but still a few leftover showers on the radar simulation tomorrow evening, so we don't completely dry out until later tomorrow night. How much rain are we talking about? In general, again, not enough to lead to any significant flooding threat, but a few deeper puddles, maybe some flood-prone intersections may have some concerns tomorrow morning, primarily during that morning commute when the heaviest rain is falling. About 1.5 inches of rain around Ben Lomond in the Santa Cruz Mountains. Otherwise, 1/10 of an inch to 1/4 inch in most of the rain-shadowed locations around the Bay Area, with 1/4 to 1/2 inch of rain in most other communities, just a little bit more for the North Bay, and especially some of those coastal ranges of the North Bay, where you're going to get some of the strongest winds as well. Let's talk about that aspect of the system. We're going to see those winds gusting up to around 40 miles an hour already by midnight, with the strongest gusts accompanying that initial push of rain, 40 to 50 mile an hour gusts sweeping across the Bay Area for at least a brief period of time. And that's strong enough to bring down at least some branches, maybe even entire trees in a few locations. And that leads to the potential for some sporadic power outages. Again, for the first half of the day tomorrow. The winds are going to be relaxing already by tomorrow afternoon. Temperature-wise, it's going to be cool for everybody across the Bay Area as we head through the entire day. So let's just take a look at the forecast over the next 7 days. Everybody's going to be in the 60s tomorrow, and then we see some more differences developing. Inland temperatures are going to reach up into the low to mid-70s over the weekend. A few warm days, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, with those inland temperatures reaching up to about 5 degrees above normal. Bayside temperatures will also warm up. A couple days near average Thursday and Friday, and then warmer than normal conditions from Saturday through the first half of next week, despite a little more cloud cover building into the skies overhead by Monday and Tuesday. After tomorrow, the rest of the 7-day forecast is dry, just beyond that time frame. By Wednesday and Thursday of next week, that's when it looks like the next rainmaker is going to head our way, so we'll have plenty of time to keep your eyes on that one.
All right, thank you, Paul. This is a look at the latest numbers for Proposition 50. It has been holding steady for much of the night, 66% of the vote being counted and tabulated at this point. The current numbers, 64.7% to 35.3%. Stick with us. We're going to wrap up an historic election night and all the latest on Proposition 50's apparent approval. That's coming up right after a short break. And recapping our top stories tonight, Proposition 50 approved in a landslide in California. You see the current numbers there. 66% of the vote counted thus far, 64.7% yes, 35.3% no's.
This was a victory for California Governor Democrat Gavin Newsom, who basically said tonight that this is a sign of what could be to come in the fight, in his words, against the Trump administration and their policies.
Yeah, the governor was very confident. He did something this past week that you almost virtually never hear politicians do. He said, I don't need any more of your money. They had reached their fundraising goals. They were confident that they had a sizable double-digit lead. And he said, we're not going to collect any more money. We're not going to do any more fundraising because we think we've got this in the bag. And tonight, he was proven right.
Yes, by a wide margin, wider, in fact, even than what early polls suggested it could be.
Yeah, the early polling, not to interrupt you, said about 62%, and it's outperforming even those polls.
Yeah, still more ballots to be counted, but a very busy night indeed. Thank you so much for watching tonight. We will have the latest on election night in California on the late news at 11.
And as always, you can get the latest weather and headlines at kpix.com and on the CBS News app.